help or defend me. They also didn't laugh. And for me, that display of passive empathy was something. It's been decades, but the cruel cacophony of my classmates' ridicule hasn't died down. Sure, it's a hell of a lot easier to ignore, but I can still hear it clearly just as as was then. I trudged down the hallway, listening to my footsteps punctuate the low murmur of other classes. Before reaching the office, I stopped in the bathroom and washed the question marks off my shirt. In most memoirs, this is the point where I'm supposed to describe how that moment triggered some mild epiphany that altered the course of my prepubescence, contributing a foundational stone upon which my current outlook is built. But I didn't learn anything from that moment. I didn't. It didn't alter the course of my prepubescence. It was merely further confirmation of what I'd already known. The next day, and for the remainder of elementary school and middle school, nothing changed. I was still weird. I was still the primary target of contempt and derision. Hell, I still drew on my shirt sometimes. What did change that day, however, was when I got home. I was able to ease my alienation with a trip across time and space to a rendezvous at Paradise Towers where I could see the doctor. Free from ridicule, I could admire his bravery, his humor, and that sweet question mark vest.
That was great. Thank you.
Thanks. It's a true story. My dad, because back then we didn't have streaming services, we didn't have TiVo and things like that. And for the more obscure shows, we got like a lot of our BBC content, like Mr. Bean, Faulty Towers, things like that. Those came on the PBS station, and they came on kind of late sometimes. And so my dad and other nerds like him would record it on VHS, and they'd have this sort of like network where they'd swap episodes and things like that. And I just happened to catch when he was watching Paradise Towers and was hooked instantly. I was like, "What is this?" Like I knew of Doctor Who somewhat because both my parents were Whovians back during the Tom Baker era. Yeah, there it is. Oh, that's the official BBC, uh, the VHS clamshell cover. Look at that. You got Sylvester McCoy and Bonnie Langford, and oh, there's a caretaker. Oh, it's so groovy. I mean, I was sitting on the floor in my living room or my parents' living room, and then this crazy blue box landed on this giant apartment building, and then Bonnie Langford like wants to go swimming, but there's like the weird crab robot lobster in the pool, and then like Sylvester McCoy is like funny, and he's like fighting against the blue kangs and the red kangs, and then there's like the weird old ladies that want to eat people, and it was just it struck something in me like immediately, and I was just like from the start that was just like the right show at the right age, perfection. Um, but yeah, and I had no choice. Eventually, it was going to happen because, like I mentioned, like my mom actually knit a a Baker-esque sweater. Yeah, those are my folks being very, very patient with me in posing for that photo in their backyard. But that's the sweater she knit my dad back in the late '70s as a gift when they were dating. uh, for context or for size comparison, my dad is 6'5" still. This photo was taken earlier this year. My dad's 6'5", so that's a super long scarf. Um, yeah. Aw, you're so
Oh,
adorable.
that's so wonderful. I love that. Where was that taken?
That's in their home. They live in Oak Park now, but that's just their backyard.
So you came by your nerdery very genetically. Um, well, I don't want to say genetic. This would be more upbringing than genetics. Yeah. So you came by it naturally from your parents. Always the best way. We are getting a few comments from our viewers.
Oh,
Ben Paul says that what you were reading reminds him of his high school days. Your story reminds me of my high school days, he says. And then we also have a question from Meg Bjorkman. Is it better to go for self-publishing or go to a professional publishing place for your books?
I'm not sure I understand the question. So, like to create the books or to like to acquire them?
I think she's asking if someone was going to write their own
Like to create the
memoir or
books or to like
story
to
or such. Is
acquire
it
them?
do you do you feel it was better for you to have gone the self-publishing route or
Write their
to
own.
peddle your story to a publishing house?
For me personally, and so this is not like the blanket answer, but for my work and my style of writing, or like my style of working when I'm writing, DIY or indie publishing, self-publishing, is just a perfect fit. Um, I did initially with my first novel from a few years back. Tried to, I was trying to make a TV show. I'll do the short version of this, and I wasn't finding any takers. The few meetings I had. Um, they wanted to change the character in a way I didn't like, too much control. So instead of doing it as a TV pitch, I was like, well, I'm just going to write it. And so I changed it to a novel. And I was taking that around thinking like, oh, I work in television. This can't be that hard. We're all entertainment. And every publishing house that I had spoken, this is just my experience again. Every publishing house that I had went to were asking about who my representation was, who was my literary agent. I said, oh, I don't have a literary agent. So let me go get one of those and then I'll come back. And then every lit agent that I spoke with was asking where it had been published. So it was this weird sort of catch-22. Like when you first get out of college and you want to get that first job, they're like, oh, we'd love to hire you, but you don't have any experience. It's like, well, I can't get experience until you hire me. So that was my, but it's been a godsend. I've done 7 books now. I've got, or no, eight books, or a bunch of books. Next one's on the way. I postponed the launch a little bit. It was pretty groovy, but like I do my own covers. The hard part is you have to, hire your own editor. You have to do your own promotion. But I'm just kind of writing the stories that I think would be cool, and in some cases, other people agree and think that they're pretty cool. So for self-publishing that worked, I mean, oh, I could do some. That's right, you can see me. So these are like the books that came before Black Nerd Blue Box. Um, they're all fiction, all Afrofuturism. Like I design my own covers with Photoshop and stuff. I write about whatever the hell I feel like it. There's no continuation. Yeah, this was actually Dragon Various, my second book's my most popular one, but rather than follow up with that one, I went a complete different direction with Preternaturalist, and then there's like decided like I'm kind of done with Afrofuturism. Let's get into Afro horror. So then I pivoted and did like a bunch of scary short stories from like a black perspective, as in like I don't know. I'm not gonna hype my books until the end, but for DIY publishing, that's something. Oh, and then of course, Big Ass Aliens. That's because I was told by a very close friend my titles are too pretentious and too like polysyllabic. Because the original, for example, the original title of Big Ass Aliens was The Perspicacious Rise of Jabari, which I thought perfectly sums up what the book's about. It's about the perspicacious rise of a character named Jabari. And she was like, that's literally the worst thing I've ever heard. That's a terrible title. And I was like, well, what am I going to call it? She's like, well, what's it about? I was like, well, these big ass aliens. She's like, there it is. And so, but if I had a publisher, I feel like they would have some pushback. Like maybe we can't call this big ass aliens. And the fact that it's a complete deviation from its immediate predecessor, which was a collection of horror stories, and which that followed a bunch of ads, and then to pivot into a memoir about being a black nerd who's obsessed with Doctor Who. So for me, the indie scene is where it's at. It's so much easier now to get into it. There's so many avenues. Yeah. So I hope that super long rambling question or answered your very concise and well thought out question.
No, I think that was great. I think that was a very detailed answer. We do have another question from Ben Paul. He wants to know, will you be writing another Doctor Who book?
Yes. Short answer is yes. Because I realized with Black Nerd Blue Box, I was trying to balance out the black nerd with the blue box, and I definitely want to do one of those sort of unofficial guides. In addition to Who, I'm also a massive, massive, massive Trekkie and a huge fan of Wonder Woman, and there's a lot of great compilations of just insights and reviews of various episodes and films, and like there are some great books comparing the different eras of Wonder Woman and like Wonder Woman's impact. And so I have an outline talking about Doctor Who and how even though it's not as well known in the States at the same level of pop cultural saturation as like a Star Trek or Star Wars or some of our other homegrown fandoms, it still has influenced a lot. And I really want to dive into specific instances, especially contrasting kind of the latter era or the latter half of the classic era, which was kind of like that's my wheelhouse. Like I started with McCoy and then kind of went backwards, and then of course fell in love with McGann, and then was cautiously optimistic when they announced that there's going to be some new Who because as a diehard classic Who, I was like, you don't screw up my Who. What are you doing? And then found out like, oh no, you guys totally got this right. This is amazing. This is great. So again, super long and short TLDR. Yes, I will be writing more books on Who. I'm thinking of again focusing on specific episodes, comparing, contrasting classic to contemporary, and how that has impacted America in terms of a pop cultural sense. So more of a reference as opposed to a memoir.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. I have sometimes wondered if Doctor Who has the largest library of reference material published of any fandom. I do think it outstrips Star Trek at this point
I mean,
for reference.
it's older than Star Trek, so that would be fair. But there's just also so much more. And again, I love my Trek, but there is so much more. Who I mean, because Trek also has novelizations. They also have some questionable comic book runs. But Who, we've got the radio dramas, we've got comic books, we've got unofficial comic books, we've got tons of fanfic, and then we have all the canon, the uncanon, the lost episodes. There's so much material there, and it covers so much just because of the nature of the fandom. Like Star Trek is still as expansive as the Star Trek universe is. It's still limited by that. Okay, these are the rules. We're in the Federation. We're on the ship. It's kind of pseudo-military, kind of post whatever. Doctor Who, the rule is whatever we can think of is fine, and so they can address pretty much any topic anywhere in space and time
Have you
from any
read
perspective.
the Doctor Who Star Trek crossover comics?
I read one with the 11th Doctor hanging out with the TNG crew. That was okay. It was interesting. So I think it was IDW.
Yeah.
It was yeah, that was something.
That's a nice, it's a very
Yes.
politic answer, yes.
It was a comic book miniseries that was released to the public. That's what I can say about it. That's my review. It
Great.
didn't have no typos.
So let's go for some classic Doctor Who question. And by classic Doctor Who questions, I don't mean questions about classic Doctor Who, but the Doctor Who questions that are the classic questions that everyone asks about Doctor Who.
Oh,
So Sylvester McCoy was your first Doctor. Who was your favorite Doctor?
Sylvester McCoy.
All right.
Yes.
And who is your favorite companion then?
So that's where it gets tricky. So because I have who I think is the best companion, and then I have like my favorite. So I think the best companion of all time was Sarah Jane. I think
A
that,
fair answer.
yeah. But so to me, it's like she has to be almost taken out of consideration because she's just so far. And I mean, she was there for so. She's perfect. So getting rid of Sarah, which sadly reality did for us anyway. Cursed immortality. Um, my favorite companion after that would be Ace. Uh, I wish I could say it's because I thought she was the coolest, and I'm finally comfortable enough to like, no, I just saw her at the right time, the right age. She struck a chord. She was a very cool companion. Love Sophie Aldred. Uh, so she's definitely my favorite companion. Just slightly above Martha Jones, only because I think Martha got the short end of the stick. I think that there was so much potential in her character, and she did so much of what little she had. And when you talk to a lot of the new, or when I've talked to a lot of the newer Whovians, or people have come to a little bit later, and they start listing off like their favorite episodes, a lot of times they are Martha episodes, especially when they talk about villains. When you think about like Blink, like, oh yeah, even though it's a Dr. Light episode, that was the Doctor and Martha, or the Judoon, which was Martha's first appearance, of course. But it's also like, oh, we have a Doctor who's a companion, and she's kind of smart. And unlike Grace, she didn't murder the Doctor when she first met him. Um, and then of course Romana too, because Romana too is just so sassy and funny and awesome. And yes, so it's kind of like Ace, Martha, and then there's sort of like a 40-way tie, and then at the bottom would be like, I don't know, like Chameleon was kind of not for me. Uh, then there's
We
like
don't need to talk about
the
who's at the
Scottish
bottom.
kid. Everyone hated that Scottish kid. Ugh.
Colin Baker always talks about how he hates the lists um, that rank all the way to the bottom. It's like it's one thing to say who your favorite is, but saying who your least favorite is just kind of mean.
I mean, to be fair, um, I don't dislike any companion per se. Adam Mitchell was annoying for a while, but he wasn't really there too much. And even in the comics, he kind of got his comeuppance. Um, the annoying Scottish kid was still cool. He was still like he had his charm. Like there was no like flat out terrible. I mean, what I want to see is I want 13 and Missy to team up because I want the Doctor's Companion to be a Time Lord. I know we've had Romana and Dr. Donna, but like ah, that's all about. But Missy and 13, come on, Michelle Gomez, Jodie Whittaker, that would be some groovy TV right there, just for one season. Just give me one season.
We gotta. Are we broadcasting? Can someone let me know if we should pause for a second? Seeing live video on Facebook has been interrupted.
The streaming tool temporarily paused, and it is being rebooted. And looking at the YouTube live, it appears to be up.
Okay.
Will someone confirm the Facebook live?
Because I would like to have you do another excerpt, but I want to make sure that we are broadcasting before you start reading again. So, tech team, should he start reading or should we wait? Should we dive? YouTube is up. And what about Facebook? Thank you, our audience, for bearing with us through our technical difficulties here. Okay, looks like Facebook is also up. So, T, let's have you do another excerpt from your. Are you going to be reading some more from Black Nerd Blue Box? Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, I will do excerpts from Black Nerd Blue Box. This one is. So this is more. This excerpt is more about the Black Nerd part of the Blue Box. So I tried to like divvy them up. But I think that what I was trying to go for with the memoir was that relatability that we're all, or at least if you've ever felt like you were not cool, or even if you were cool but still kind of outside, um, you're not the only one. And so yeah. So this is a little bit more on the Black Nerd side of the Black Nerd Blue Box, but this is an excerpt from the chapter or the memory called "Your Natural Horrid Self." Because all the memories have Doctor Who quotes as titles. Because I'm a big nerd. When the 90s started, I was 5'10" tall, with a size 12 shoe and a physique lengthy enough to fit through a basketball hoop. I was even taller than a bunch of my teachers, and my sartorial choices reflected my interests. My interests weren't exactly at the top of the popularity pyramid. See, gangster rap had just begun its saturation of pop culture, and while most kids were rocking baggy tees, tracksuits, and ginormous jeans, my style was present-day grunge meets post-war hipster with a heavy dose of 60s psychedelia. It wasn't MTV or BET, it was WTF. My go-to outfit was a tie-dye tee and shredded jeans as a base. Then I'd either tie a plaid shirt around my waist or wear it open and half tucked. I'd top off the look with a beanie, Doc Martens, and way too many pieces of cheap pewter jewelry. While many black boys were emulating the asymmetrical fade that Tupac rocked in the film Juice, my hairstyle was closer to Frederick Douglass with a hangover. Let me catch you playing that devil stuff again, I swear. I'll kick you in the mouth and break your teeth, punk-ass white boy nerd. No, he held my cassette tape just out of reach. For a moment, I thought he was going to break it. He'd already thrown me to the ground and punched me in the face, and even though my eye hurt, I was more concerned about saving my music than potentially having to hide a shiner. The devil stuff that had triggered this latest round of beatings was Kickstart My Heart by Motley Crue, which he had heard blasting from my headphones in a rare moment of carelessness. Silly me, I thought I was so clever, thought I had been careful. See, the night before, I'd taken my Batman soundtrack cassette, the Danny Elfman score, not the collection of woefully underrated Prince tunes, and put scotch tape over the tabs. It was an old hack that enabled you to record over store-bought tapes. I'd been getting really into the local rock music station, The Loop, and had taped a bunch of music that at the time I thought was the hardest, most extreme rock music ever created. Looking back, yes, it's pretty funny. I mean, here, this little cappuccino colored kid with crazy hair thinking he's the ultimate rebel because he idolized a bunch of fellas in makeup and spandex singing about parties, cars, and girls. But at the time, the combination of distorted guitars and tenor vocals were a subversive anti establishment soundtrack. I mean, Motley Crue's Kickstart My Heart was one of my favorite tunes, mostly because there's a line in the bridge where Vince Neil says the word ass twice. I was well aware at this point of how dangerous my taste could be. Sure, the late 80s and early 90s were all about authenticity, but I learned the hard way that that philosophy of keeping it real didn't extend to black kids who like hair metal. But for the moment, the Batman soundtrack Deception kept me safe. My on again, off again tormentor, Tyrannosaurus, not his real name, saw me carrying the tape case and let me go, but when I cranked up the crew and he overheard something more suitable for headbanging and pogoing than head bopping and breakdancing blaring from my headphones, he unleashed hell. He menacingly held my poorly hidden audio indulgence in his fist. There was a look of twisted enjoyment smeared across his young face. He relished in these moments of uncontested dominance. I was 6 inches taller and a good 15 pounds heavier, but I was as much a nerd as he was a bully, and kicking around someone so much physically larger clearly gave him an insatiable power rush. Why do you listen to this devil stuff? He smirked. I don't know. I just like it, I whimpered, trying desperately to hold back the tears aggressively welling up in my sore eyes. This is that devil stuff those white boys on TV listen to. Why are you trying to be white? You hate black people or something? Why don't you keep it real? Well, I ain't trying to be right. I just like it. White boy devil stuff, Tyrannosaurus spat. He threw my tape on the ground and stomped on it. Now, you know how in teen movies from the 80s where, like, in the third act, the nerd stands up to the bully and by the sheer act of defiance, the bully concedes and sometimes even apologizes? This was not that moment. What the hell? I screamed. To both our surprise, I jumped to my feet and pushed him. It took me an hour to make that. Because of our physical differences, my shove sent him stumbling backwards. Then the realization set in. There are kids who fight and kids who don't fight. I'm not a kid who fights. He got back to his feet, kicked me in the stomach. I crumpled to the ground and curled into a ball to try and lessen the pain and damage of his blows. The outpouring of epithets was impressive for a kid his age. He unleashed a typhoon of verbal belligerence, calling into question my intelligence and masculinity with all manner of homophobic and ableist slurs. It felt like hours passed as he delivered his torturous punishment. I know he was embarrassed. The geeky kid pushed him down. It was a violation of the natural law of the playground. I pulled myself to my feet, trying in vain to ignore the other kids who'd been watching. Their voyeuristic silence was the same as my classmates years earlier when my teacher embarrassed me for wearing my homemade Doctor Who shirt. To them, it was just another episode of the Kick the Crap Out of the Nerd Show, a long-running series that had been going on for so long, it wasn't even worth talking about afterwards. Taylor says wares are just something nerdy. Tyrannosaurus beats him up. They'd seen the show before, but nobody cared enough to even consider it could or should be changed. To me, however, this was the final straw. No, there wasn't an awesome moment where I waited until Tyrannosaurus's back was turned and pounced on him, delivering some semi-justifiable retribution for years of neighborhood torment. Instead, Tyrannosaurus walked away laughing. One of the older kids who hung out by the bleachers just outside the playground area came over and helped me straighten my jacket. Hey man, you okay? What? Yeah, I guess. What's up with that dude? He doesn't like my music. The older kid picked up the cracked cassette and handed it to me. It was completely ruined. No amount of scotch tape was going to be able to make it playable. Batman? You kicked your ass over Batman? No, I record over it. I was listening to. I stopped mid sentence. See, I just survived my regularly scheduled assault. I was definitely not looking for a back to back beatdown. What? What were you listening to? Motley Crue. Really? That's cool. I was dumbfounded. The things I was interested in have been called a lot of things, the vast majority of which I would never repeat, but cool is definitely not one of them. You think Motley Crue is cool? I mean, the older kid began as he dusted off my jacket. I think it's cool that you were hiding it on the Batman tape. Crew is all right. But I think that hair metal stuff's a little cheesy. You know Bad Brains? What's Bad Brains? The older kid smirked, reached in his pocket, and gave me one of those aftermarket blank tapes. A swatch of masking tape ran across the top in which song titles were scrawled in sloppy blank. Bad Brains is way cooler than hair metal. But thanks. Hey, don't thank me. Just listen to it. The older kid nodded and walked back across the playground. I threw the crushed remains of my Batman Motley Crue tape in the trash and popped my newly acquired hand-labeled cassette into my Walkman and pressed play. The opening chords of Sailing On blasted through my headphones. Before the song ended, just under 2 minutes later, I was a total convert. No more Motley Crue, no more hair metal. I even neglected my standard favorites like Jimi Hendrix, the Beatles, and jazz. A few days later, the older kid told me the tape was a dubbed copy of Bad Brains' self-titled EP, aka the Yellow Tape. completely blew my mind. Never heard anything so raw and passionate, yet at the same time musically proficient and complex. A little while later, I got a copy of Quickness, the newest, well, at the time, Bad Brains record. The music was amazing, but even more mind blowing was that the photo of the band was on the cover. This wasn't white boy devil stuff. This was four black guys with beards, long dreads, and plaid shirts. The vindication was nice, but I knew that the music I dug, and all music in general, isn't beholden to one racial group or another. What was awesome is that I could exploit their racial based ignorance of Tyrannosaurus and the other bullies. I could leave the cassette tapes out on the lunch table or read the liner notes openly on the school bus. And the kids would stare, but as long as I kept the music down, all they saw was black guys on the cover. And because of their ridiculous, erroneous beliefs that rock was white and pop was black, they left me alone. And the key word there is alone. I was alone but not lonely. And as grammar school creeps into middle school, high school, and beyond, the notion of following the trend faded from popularity and digging what you dug became the new hip. Oh no.
I don't think I'm familiar with Bad Brains, but I think I'm gonna have to look them up.
Oh yeah, their track bands in DC. I mean, it's hardcore or like West Coast hardcore, like straight up punk music. But they were so I think they were like a bunch of jazz cats, and they also did a lot of reggae and like Caribbean styles, and then they just kind of mixed that with metal. And they weren't the ones who originated hardcore music, of course, but they were just like such a fantastic raw band, and it's so good. And they
So-
saved me from getting beat up.
Since we're talking about music, let's talk a little bit about Doctor Who music and what are your thoughts about Doctor Who music?
I mean, I like the theme, of course. I really that was one of the things I will say as someone who started with classic era and followed it through the contemporary. I do prefer the contemporary era's take on the Doctor Who theme, especially about halfway through the 10th Doctor's run, the 10th Doctor's version, which is like, yeah, that feels good. That's what it was supposed to be. Like the classic Who was, I mean, it's still the same melody and everything, but I don't know. They're definitely kind of like some of the special effects are you love it because you love the show, not so much because they're actually that good. I feel the same with the classic. And oh, having the score, like I just keep thinking of like every time the 11th Doctor says run, um, that big swell, dun, 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 and you knew something was about to happen. It's like, oh, here it goes. Like having an orchestral score, uh, Doctor Who music is great, and I think it's their music directors over the decades have been fantastic, especially, and I will give contemporary Who credit. Not that there is any bad Who, but the contemporary Who, like the music, is just spot on.
What about the really electronic synthesized electronic from the classic era?
I mean, all Who was good Who, all Who's good Who. No, I mean, at the time it was really cool because back then that was at least from compared to everything else I was watching, it was like you had a lot of those cheesy shows, especially for sitcoms, where it's like some not even like pop, but like adult contemporary soft pop with lyrics that told you what the show was about. So Doctor Who was like, oh, this is cool. This is some kind of weird, bizarre alien thing. Because even the other shows I dug back then, like Star Trek, Next Generation, which was on at the time, they just had Jerry Goldsmith's score, which is still nice, but it was still pretty traditional. It's classical music, whereas Doctor Who sounded very bizarre. Um, Especially, it was a nice break. So I shouldn't crap on it too much because it compared to like the Family Matters theme song or something like that, it was I definitely go Doctor Who.
Have
They
you?
never do answer the question. Whatever happened to predictability?
I guess yes. Have you ever seen the Bill Bailey clip about his take on Doctor Who music and sounding like Belgian jazz?
I haven't, but that's probably the most perfect description ever created. That's nice. Belgian jazz. Okay, I can dig it.
We did get a few comments. Let me just go through real quick. We have a comment from Jojo Hawkins. Love the real moments in this book. We have another question from Ben. What are your thoughts on telesnap reconstructions?
Ooh, I'm not against them. I think that I'm all for like just recasting and reshooting completely, which I know is heresy among some Whovians. But rather than animating with the voiceover or the voice tracks and things like that. Why not? I mean, we've got the scripts, and it's not like Who is a fandom that's opposed to recasting primary characters. I mean, it's kind of like that's sort of the hook. So not opposed to them. I think they can go further. Is that answer?
Sure.
Is that good?
Hey, it's an honest answer. There we go. We have a couple of comments from YouTube. Shannon Paul says, "Wonderful Taylor." Smiley face, smiley face, smiley face. And we have the Twonky saying, "Malcolm Clark made the world complete." And then we have a question from Bruce. What Doctor Who episode could you watch over and over?
Oh boy. Uh, well, I mean, the easy answer would be things like Paradise Towers, Blink. But I'm gonna go with some newer ones just to make it more challenging. But I found myself because I try and watch Who over and over again. It's just like a weird habit I have. The same thing with Star Trek. I watch Star Trek episodes over and over again. Uh, so the Doctor I haven't seen the most is actually 12. And I've got nothing against Capaldi. It's just sort of like I watched them as they came, and they just kind of came and went because there was no thought of it. It's just like, oh, it's on. Here's a new episode. But going back and watching it, Smile is surprisingly, I found to be like really subversive. Um, Especially because there's that underlying message with the, I guess, let me back up. So Smiles, like where 12 and Bill go to the weird planet that's made out of where the robots have taken over because they had some kind of programming error where they were supposed to make people happy, but then they realized like if you weren't happy, then they started basically killing you, which is kind of like, yeah, it's most Doctor Who episodes. Everything seems right, but then something nefarious is happening. Um, I love that episode. Watching it, especially, it feels very timely. And maybe I have a weird way of looking at the world, but this idea of being forced to pretend that things are okay at risk of great harm obviously is blown out a bit in that episode. Um, Probably a bit much. And then, of course, Vincent the Doctor, which I know a lot of people say they can only watch once because it's so heartbreaking. But like to me, that's just a masterclass, and just that's like a perfect episode. That whole episode could have been released as a film. Granted, it's short for a feature film, but and obviously all the Whovians watching or if you're familiar with that episode, um, and I don't have to repeat it, but it's just every performance, every nuance. That is like that's probably one of the more perfect because all Doctor Who is perfect, but that's one of the more perfect episodes. And honestly, shit, not Skyfall. Damn it, the opening to this most recent season, the premiere episode.
Spyfall. Was that Spyfall?
Was it Spyfall? Yeah, that was some good Who. That was like they find because Jodie 13 is definitely high on my list of favorite doctors. Like she gave Seven a run for his money for that first season, despite what I felt were some shortcomings on the writers and producers. Um, and Spyfall, I was like, oh, that's 13. That's what we could have. Actually, a lot of the later season I could watch, probably because I have been watching them over and over again. So Kerblam, love that one. Arachnids in the UK is great. um, I mean, is that Bruce? Bruce, what are you doing? That's a super hard question. Like, which ones can I watch over and over again? Like most of them.
So, well, what have you watched? If you had to guess, have you watched Doctor Who more or Star Trek?
Ooh. Uh, I know this is a console room. This is Who It Yourself, so I know what I'm supposed to say. But I'll be honest, I have definitely watched way more Star Trek than Who. Uh, just because Star Trek was way more accessible, especially during. So I was in college from '97 to '01, so it was really hard. We didn't have streaming. Like Netflix back then was still brand new. I think that happened right at the end of college for me. And back then, that was where you like went to your mailbox and you had like a weird paper envelope. So, but Star Trek reruns were always on, and as a huge Star Trek fan, um, I mean, they're still making movies. Uh, yeah, so I've definitely seen a lot more Star Trek than Who, but I have been trying to catch up.
Great, great. So I think that is we're caught up with questions and stuff. Do you you have one more excerpt, I believe.
I do. Yeah. So I know that I get comments sometimes, especially when I'm or from live cons and stuff like that. Like you're very this, and I know for people that don't know me, it can be a little off-putting because there's a lot of me. I'm 6'2", and I go out sideways quite a bit and things like that. And so like staying a guy, but it's all authentic. And so I was gonna close. I had two going back and forth between which ones, but I am gonna go with this one. It's a little slightly heavier. It's just more about disposition in general.
Are you gonna make us
Around,
all cry at the end?
I hope not, or I hope so. Why not? But this is kind of like this is kind of why I am the way I am. The reason why I choose to be more boisterous and you know optimistic and happy and things like that. I guess I should also warn if someone's like watching and they're like, "Oh, this sounds kind of groovy." So I'm deliberately reading the more linear narrative parts of the book, but in between there's actually I'm not gonna spoil it. Whatever. So this one's called "Hope is Hard to Resist." This is an excerpt. It's somewhat short, so yeah, I'll just read it.
Great.
I was 7 years old when my mom was diagnosed with terminal breast cancer. She'd found a sizable, irregularly shaped lump in her breast, and tests confirmed that it was cancerous. I didn't know what was going on. I just knew that my mom and dad were sad, scared, and worried. My sister and I would sit in blissful ignorance, bouncing on the squishy seats of the waiting rooms of various hospitals and clinics, completely oblivious to the serious conversations in which phrases like terminal, hospice, and get your affairs in order floated over our heads. When we got home, my mom and dad sat my sister and I down in the living room. Even at that young age, we knew something serious was about to transpire. Ours was a family of laughter and constant conversation. Topics weren't topics so much as chapter markers in an ongoing quadrilogue that only paused for sleep and separation. Sitting on the couch in our 20th floor apartment overlooking Lake Michigan, those few dozen seconds of silence were telling. I don't remember the exact words or sentences my parents used, but the message was impossible to misunderstand. My ma was likely going to die. Of all the emotions, grief isn't something that can be compartmentalized or rationalized. The somewhat cynical adage that death is a part of life is fatuous when the experience is firsthand. While you would question the inconceivability of telling somebody in the throes of grief that they'll get beyond it, or that the emotional, physical, and psychological affliction will pass in a matter of months or even years after the fact, what many don't discuss is that no set time frame for you to begin mourning. It can happen before the loss. Mourning is a procedure, not an event, and it has absolutely no respect for the forward momentum of the temporal flow. Like the 10th Doctor explained about time, the apprehension and anguish of loss isn't a strict progression of cause and effect. It's a crushing boulder of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey. My mom was sitting just inches away on the couch. Obviously, I'd seen her numerous times before. Hell, I'd seen her face literally every day of my young life, but in those moments, it was different. An understanding set in that she wasn't sick like when I drank spoiled milk. She was sick in a way that forced us to become empiric experts in the nature of mortal impermanence. Family is not meant to be ephemeral. And in my young mind, the possibility and probability were impossibly foreign concepts. As far as I could comprehend, there wasn't a chance that my mom was going to die. She was already dead. For the next few weeks, I missed my mom. She was there just like before, a few more doctor's appointments and less time watching television after dinner, but to me, she was gone. After all these years, it's still one of the most bizarre sensations I've ever experienced, being in mourning for someone who still poured the milk over your cereal at breakfast and tucked you in at bedtime every night. Making the entire situation worse were the well-wishers. Anytime any adult came to me and spat out empty platitudes, my tiny mind overflowed with rage. I don't know who started the rumor that lazily recycled catchphrases can serve as adequate consolation, but the fact of the matter is that nothing can console. There's no effective way to reimburse true loss. It's a hole that can never be filled. It's an equation that cannot be solved. Nothing said or done could or can provide comfort, only fleeting distraction. Grief is an individual experience. It's an emotional state distinctive to every mourner and unique to every loss. Grief may crash periodically in waves of crushing emotional distress, where times of peace and quiet are suddenly smashed by overwhelming emotion and might hang over your conscience like the early morning fog over a rural lake, shrouding your view, stubbornly obscuring the light from piercing through. There was only one piece of consolation that sank in. Out of all the teachers and neighbors and friends and people at church and people at the shops and stores we frequented, only one person said something that actually made a difference. My dad. How he kept things together, I have no clue. Even to this day, I'm awestruck and completely baffled by how he was able to get up and get done what needed doing throughout the entire ordeal. I asked him, And his answer embedded in my young mind has stayed there ever since. Dad, Ma's sick. Why aren't you sad? Well, I am sad. And your mother is sick. But she's sick. And as long as she's sick, she's still here. Since she's still here, there are things we have to do and things we get to do. So let's do them all. Now, luckily for my sister and I, my mom demanded additional tests and diagnoses. She switched docs and specialists when needed, and miraculously, through lots of procedures, treatments, and other major, minor, and medium-sized miracles, she pulled through. And I recognize fully that this isn't something that everyone's able to accomplish. There are millions who lose medical and health battles for a wide variety of reasons. Some of those reasons are tragically preventable, some horrifically inevitable, and I'm fully aware that my family was blessed, lucky, spaghetti monstered, or whatever term you want to use. My mom being here is a gift. The outcome could have been indisputably worse. That I've been able to see, speak, text, see, hear any time, any day since then has been something I can't nor won't take for granted. And that's been the outlook applied to every scenario since. My optimism isn't pure. It's tainted by cynicism, Cassandreic ennui, pragmatism, and all the other factors of an alert, observant person living today. Always knowing that it could be worse isn't blind ignorance to the matter at hand, but a gentle reminder that whatever is happening could be a lot more dire. The kicker is, however, that whatever is happening could also be a lot better than it is. Like the ancient saying goes, it's not over until it's over, and until it's over, I aggressively choose to focus on the latter. And since she's still here, there are things we have to do and things we get to do, so let's do them all. It's that last bit that really stuck with me. Of course, we have obligations. There are always things we need to do. But the meat of my father's wisdom, what really hit me was the sentiment concentrated in that follow-up quip. Obligations are a given, but it's the things we get to do that drove home the point.
Powerful.
Oh.
And I think it was really enhanced by actually hearing you read it aloud. I was going to say, you know, people should definitely try and find your book and everything. Now I'm kind of curious as to if there, if you will be releasing an audiobook version of it with you reading all of the different chapters.
I tried that once with a different book of mine, where I was doing because I wasn't that into podcasts. I was in a podcast a while back, and then I kind of got out of them, and then they got really, really popular again. I was like, well, what the hell that'll be? It seems like everyone has a podcast. Maybe I should try to have a podcast. What should my podcast be about? And I was like, well, I could try and promote my book, and I was like, I could just do each episode as a chapter. Uh, but that kind of fizzled out. But maybe audiobooks would be cool. I've actually, I guess, true confession time. I've never heard an audiobook. Like, I've listened to radio plays. I've heard like classic radio programs, and I've heard lots of podcasts. But I've never actually heard an audiobook. So I mean, I have an idea of how they would go. I know what they are. I don't know if I'd be the right voice for it though.
Well, I mean, I don't know if there's a better voice for your memoir than your own voice. And you do have, I have to say that I think you have an incredible speaking voice. So, I don't know. I think you should maybe talk to some of the people you know who make a living um, speaking out in public regularly and get, I mean, you do a lot of public speaking as well. So, I don't know, maybe something to consider.
Yeah,
Or maybe you could just come over and read the rest of your book to me sometime.
Oh, that works right. Little house. I mean, that'd be kind of fun. I mean, we're all doing a social stay-at-home, self-quarantine thing. So I'll come to your porch, and it's like that actually would be super groovy. Someone should totally start a service. It's like Bite Squad for like books,
Nice,
and
nice.
then
I like it. I like
that would
it.
be.
We did get a few last comments here. Let me just go through these real quick. Diana Tan says, "Do it justice." Meg says he would be wonderful doing an audio.
Oh.
Amber recommends that the audiobooks for How to Train Your Dragon with David Tennant is phenomenal. I will agree with that. David Tennant does a different voice for pretty much every character.
Wow.
Meg, I just wanted to let T know how very much I am enjoying his readings.
Oh.
We have one. Why don't we close out on this question from JoJo? You wake up in a Doctor Who episode and you are one of the companions. Which episode are you in?
Oh, Jesus.
How's that for a wrap up question?
Oh man. Only because I think it would be a lot of fun. So it's not my favorite Doctor. Actually, it's one of my least favorite Doctors. Uh, no, no, I won't do that. Like you said, like you'd mentioned, you don't want to talk about your least favorite or anything like that. You just talk about your favorites. But I think it would be really cool. Because I was just talking about this earlier today. Sound of the Drums. It came up in a conversation about other things. I think it would be a lot of fun to knock around with the 10th Doctor and pretty much everyone in that era trying to defeat Master Harold Saxon or the Sims Master. Uh, Plus, getting to see like 900-year-old Tennant and Davey's he's not an unattractive man. Like he's very charismatic. Again, not my favorite Doctor, but definitely in my top 13 out of all the Doctors. Uh, that would be a fun one. Yeah. Yeah, that would be really or the impossible answer not. That would be that would be a lot of fun too. Or you know what? No, Twice Upon a Time. Twice Upon a Time would be really groovy. Angels Take Manhattan would be a lot of fun. So any and every contemporary episode I would be fine with because the villains haven't been that. Yeah.
There's no Crispy Master.
Right. There's no Crispy Master. There's no Shrink Ray.
All right. Well,
um,
so where can people find your books to purchase them?
so everything is available in multiple places. I think the easiest would be just to go to my author site, which is blkintl.com. Black intellectual with no vowels except for the one that's there, but blkintl.com, which has links to the various places because there's some in Barnes and Noble, there's a bunch on Amazon, there's some in some local shops here. That is one of the downsides of being an indie author or self-published is that you are also your own distributor and you kind of go wherever you can. So I don't really have a strategy. It's like, oh, you want to sell my books? That sounds great. You should definitely do that. Or when all this craziness is over, like come see me at con because I try to go to lots of cons. I my first console room was 3 console rooms ago, and I'm trying to make it so that I never miss a console room. So come see me at console room or at the next
Great.
console room.
All right. Well, I want to thank you, T, for spending time with us tonight and reading excerpts from your book. As a reminder, next Thursday we have another Quit Yourself Live panel, That 70s Master, where we're going to be talking all about the various masters. And then coming up on the 27th, we're going to have our Quit Yourself Live, Day of the Doctor, where we're going to have a number of panels, and all of those are on our Facebook page. So check those out. I want to thank all of our viewers for bearing with us with our technical difficulties. I also want to give a shout out to Natasha and Larry for handling the tech stuff tonight, and
Woo!
Amber and Jim for monitoring Facebook and YouTube. Thank you, everybody, and thank you, T. And I don't think I have forgotten any of the stuff that I'm not supposed to forget. So, with that, everyone, stay safe, stay healthy, and have a wonderful weekend.
Bye.